Hello and welcome back to What is Your One Thing, the podcast that cuts through the noise of personal development, self-help, and gives you actionable tips and things that you can do to feel less stressed, less anxious, and feel like you can take on your day just one step at a time. Today, we're going to cover two topics. We're going to go over my oak framework, and you'll get to know a little bit more about Noah Kahan. All right. Now, what is the oak framework? Well, the best way I can describe it is that it's an acronym for the only, asymmetric, and kooky. And what does that mean? Let's start with the beginning. The only. What does it mean to be the only? Well, you've always heard of be the greatest, be the best. And I believe it's Charlie Munger that says, you don't want to be the best, you want to be the only. Not only Charlie, but there are tons of people that are quoted for saying this. If you want to be the best, don't play in the arena with everybody else. Be the only person that you are working against, because that's how you're going to succeed. You're not going to succeed by trying to be better than everybody else. Just be the only one competing in that category. That's how you're going to win. So every day at the top of my notebook, I write out this framework. So it's how can I be the only one that is trying to do this thing? It just helps change your mindset a little bit. There's always going to be somebody better than you. Podcasting example. I'm just started. I can't go and watch an episode of Joe Rogan. I cannot go put on the Tim Ferriss show and assume that that's going to be me tomorrow. So I need to put myself in my own category. I need to be the only one I am competing with, because that way I can get ahead. All right, let's cover the A. Asymmetric. Think about this one as the 80-20 principle. Business, 80% of your revenue is going to come from 20% of the top 20% of your clients. If you ever want to have leverage, what you want to do is you want to find that asymmetrical value in return. What is something that you can do, i.e. that 20%, that is going to change or have the greatest impact on that other 80. So whenever I try to tackle a problem, or I'm doing something at home, or I'm doing something at work, I'm constantly trying to find that asymmetrical value. What's something that I can do that will take the least amount of effort and elicit the greatest impact? All right, so asymmetric. Always try to find that one thing that will offset everything else. That's exactly why when I go through my oak framework, there's always this asymmetry between the letters. So that line between the A is going to be way at the top of that A frame. And then there's a line through that O to kind of show that asymmetry. Find that 20%, find that 80-20 rule, and not just business, everything. Whatever you do, always try to find that advantage. That's going to tenfold whatever you do, because instead of tackling these little problems that just don't move the needle, find the needle moving activity in everything you do. And once you do that, you can't stop. You're constantly trying to maximize your potential. Okay, now let's get to the K. K is for kooky. It used to be for awkward, but I don't want anyone to be stickler on an acronym. Either way, however you want to look at it, it's awkward, it's kooky, it's be different. You don't get anywhere in the middle of the crowd. And that's something that we lose as adults when we come out from childhood. You are your quirky self. You are all of your mannerisms, your weird things that you do that make you you. And in life, they tell you to suppress that. Be like everybody else. Be like the crowd. Fit in. Don't stand out. That makes you weird. That makes you different. Well, that's the point. You want to be different. You want to stand out in this world. Nobody wants to be vanilla. And if you do, you probably aren't listening to this podcast. So you want to find what makes you you. And sometimes that's going back to your childhood. What's that weird thing you did as a kid that it didn't seem weird to you, but when you talked about it, nobody else really found it interesting. Nobody else was really on your level. An example that comes to mind is Mr. Beast. Mr. Beast is the biggest, most followed YouTuber on the planet, and he's been doing it consistently since he was a kid. And he is a die-hard YouTuber. And that's the thing. He was obsessed with it. He he doesn't watch pop culture. If you watch the Joe Rogan interview, they're trying to talk to him about things like Harry Potter, regular pop culture things that most kids his age would know. He has no idea because he is so dedicated to YouTube. That's all he did. So that made him kooky. That made him weird. That is his thing. Don't be the greatest, be the only. Where is that asymmetric value and return in anything that you're doing? And third, be a little kooky, be a little awkward, be a little weird. Get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Anybody that has ever done anything in life has made it through that stage, that awkward, uncomfortable stage, because building anything, doing anything is going to be uncomfortable. Don't be like the 99% that stops. Most people avoid being uncomfortable. Most people avoid that like the plague because it is weird. It is going to make you different, but that's how you get to the other side. That is how you build that business. That is how you land that new job. That is how you start your own company. It's getting to the other side of uncomfortable, and the only way to do that is to be kooky, is to be weird, is to try new things, and ultimately find what makes you you. Because again, you're the only you. You're the only one that has your life, your experiences, your skills, your memory, your mind. And that's the greatest thing ever. So, how does that tie into this week's episode? And who the heck is Noah Kahan? Well, I didn't know his name either, so don't feel bad. But you've definitely heard his music. Everyone can sing along to that song, Stick Season. And what a lot of people don't know is Noah's backstory. So, Noah grew up in a small town in Vermont of about 1,000 people. Now, when you live in this small rural town, growing up and being a world-famous musician is not usually something that they teach in school. He started performing at the age of 9 and learned the guitar by around 12. He even performed a song at his talent show in middle school called Wednesdays Are the Worst Days of My Life. He thought he stunned the crowd so much in silence. He's riding high on this. Hears a knock at the door, and he's like, oh, great, this must be the record company. Not the record deal. It was actually his school therapist, and that song landed him 2 weeks in mandatory therapy. That didn't deter him. He actually made the bold choice of dropping out of college right as he was going in and actually signed a record deal. Now, for most people, you've made it. You've got a record deal. Not quite. They're not all made the same. So yes, he might have been signed on a record, but he still was just barely scraping by, barely selling tickets. He actually tells this crazy story of how he was playing in a small venue that had 1,000 tickets, and he sold about 940 of them. Well, he actually used his mom's credit card and bought the remaining 60 tickets and then went on social media and said, oh my God, I can't believe it. I sold out this show, completely like compartmentalizing the fact that he himself bought those last remaining tickets. And he goes on to say that his mom actually confronts him and says, hey, what's this $500 charge? And he's like, I have no idea. And then it hits him that he's like, oh shoot, I sold out my own show. So he's doing this. He has a couple of okay hits, and he lands himself on one of the late night talk show hosts. I believe it was the Stephen Colbert show. Well, then 2020 hits. And like most kids in their 20s, find themselves back at home in their parents' house, in the house they grew up in during the pandemic. And what does everybody do during pandemic? They find themselves on their phone, social media. So he gets on TikTok, and he does okay. Has a couple tens of thousand followers. Things are working out. That's what the app's made for. It's made for music. Well, then he does the intro or a verse for Stick Season, and it does nothing. It goes nowhere. He's feeling a little down on himself. He's thinking, he's like, crap, I should probably just delete this. I should get rid of it. Well, he doesn't. He ends up eating an edible and falling asleep, which is probably the greatest thing he could have ever done, because he wakes up And the song has just taken off. It is gone bananas. And he thinks, oh, this is great. I need to write the rest of the song. Now, obviously, we all know the history to that. It takes off, it becomes a huge success, and now it's the cornerstone of his music. Well, the thing is that whole time he was just trying to find his sound. This Stick Season song was different than everything else he had done previously. It wasn't something that he had generally played before. He was going back to his roots. He was back home, and he was more playing off the music that he grew up with, the stuff that felt good to him. He was being authentic. He was being himself. He was being the only thing that he knew how to be. And that's why it worked. He was quirky. He was awkward. He was vulnerable. He even says people listen to his music because he talks about what it's like to be a kid or be in your early 20s and just trying to navigate this life, if it's relationships, if it's growing up and it's anxiety, it's mental health. And that's why it really resonates with people, because of his authenticity. It is who he is. All right. How did these connect? Well, he followed the Oak framework. Noah Kahan, he's the only one that has this eclectic experiences of growing up in a town of 1,000 people in Vermont. He uses that to his advantage with his own ability to tell stories, to be lyrically inclined, to build these amazing prose that really pull at the heartstrings. He leveraged the 80-20 principle. He is putting himself out there. He was constantly making content for people to find. Okay, when you want to be a performer, if you want to be a musician, the only way to get fans is to put yourself out there. So you have to make content. Even though he didn't like it, he didn't understand TikTok in the beginning, and he almost deleted it. Thankfully he didn't, because that's just how it happens. That's how he got discovered in the first place, was putting music on SoundCloud, was doing things like YouTube. That's how he got his first record deal. He's been constantly putting himself in these situations by putting himself in uncomfortable situations. If you've never posted anything on the internet, it's because you feel awkward. You feel weird. You don't want to be judged. Everyone's afraid of what everyone thinks of them or how they're going to think of them if they show their authentic self. But he put that all aside and he kept doing it. He kept doing it, and consistency is key. So he found that leverage where he needed to at that point in time, which was TikTok. Is that the same today? I don't know. I can't tell you, because I personally don't know how to use TikTok. So you'll have to find your own leverage. That's the problem. If it was easy, everyone would do it. You have to find what is your 20% in whatever you're trying to do to really gain access to that leverage. And lastly, he's awkward. He's kooky. If you listen to interviews with him, he is that friend that is like a deer in headlights whenever you ask him a question. He's kind of a little confused, and he's just so authentic that you can't just not like the guy. He's not polished. He's not like, that musicians that has done an interview 1,000 times. He's also not this overnight success. Even though, yes, this one song blew up and made him super popular, he started when he was 9 years old. All right? So this goes back to the beginning of, what did you do as a kid that made you different, that made you quirky, that made you awkward? What is that thing that you loved, that you fell in love with, and you could do no matter what? Now, as the years went on, society's pressure has turned that switch off, or it's told you it's not okay to do that thing. It's not okay to collect model trains, or it's weird to do improv, or it's weird to have this one strange hobby. I want you to get that back. I want you to go back to middle school, elementary recess, and what got you excited? What were you doing on the playground? What were you talking to with your friends about? What lit you up? That gets me excited. That gets me happy. And I think this is something that is bringing out what I wanted to do. I loved entertaining, but helping people. My friends used to joke that I was like the therapist of the group. People could always come to me and talk to me about their problems. And I like to help, but I like to do it in a fun, different way. And I think that's what I'm trying to do here. So, for this week, I'm not giving you one thing. I want you to find it. What is the one thing that you did as a kid that made you different, that made you kooky, that made you awkward? What's the one thing that made you, you? All right. Thank you for joining me today. This was a bit of a awkward whirlwind, and we'll end it in an awkward note just to fit the theme. So if you're watching on video, I've got my therapy couch, and yeah, come talk to me. Come tell me your troubles, your worries, and let's work through them together to figure out what your one thing is, what you can do different, what you can do to find the real you, the authentic you, without worrying about the judgment of others or how the world's going to perceive you. Because if I know one thing, I know other people, and I know that a majority, they're not thinking about you. They're thinking about themselves and how you see them. And once you realize that fact, it's very eye-opening. You can try new things, and it's okay to fail, because you know what? Nobody's going to remember it, but they will remember when you make it. So, let's do it together. You can get a hold of me on whatisyourOneThing@gmail.com. So send me that thing. Send me your one quirky, kooky thing. And that's the words, what's your, the number one, and the word thing @gmail.com. And let's make this world a little bit more fun, a little bit more enjoyable. All right. That's enough for today. Talk to you guys soon.
Pikachu's out for the count.
He's gonna bring a zombie. A zombie.